moderator has it all. All right, so we have to wrap up for sure at 4 p.m., right? So let's get started. Maybe I'll first introduce the moderator, who was actually my colleague, Duncan, flying straight from home. Maybe not so straight from home.
No, not quite.
Not so straight. Where were you?
Surprised to be on the panel. Also, I didn't know about this until I arrived. But my name is Duncan Turner. I'm general partner at SOSV, which is a fund which supports hacks, IndieBio, and a number of other programs. I specifically look after hacks, so focus on all the very early stage investments into hardware that we run through our program in San Francisco and also in Shenzhen, which is where I live. Well, I live in Hong Kong, but nearby. Close enough. We have an amazing panel here. I really mean that. Sometimes people say that, but no, we really do have an incredible panel. Humbled to kind of be with you guys. I'm going to leave loads of questions for the end, so 30 minutes of plenty questions because there's loads of startups. So actually, can we just raise a hand so the panel knows who's a startup in the audience? Who's a hardware startup? That's pretty impressive. Other investors? Okay, press. So we can say what we want. Great. Corporates? Okay, so I think maybe just some introductions to you guys. You all invest in different things across different stages. Maybe just introduce yourselves and give a background.
Hi, my name is Adam. I have a fund called BoxGroup. We're based here in New York. We're about 8.5 years old as a fund. We're total generalists, look at everything from social consumer to enterprise and sort of everything in between. We're focused on really early stage, and for us that means first money into the seed round is the ideal point to meet a company and to first invest, and then ideally we're building a relationship and we're following on for 3 or 4 rounds after that. There are certainly spaces and themes that we follow, but we are people and founder focused more than pieces focused. We're investing out of our third fund. We don't have any outside investors, it's all internal capital. And we're a team of 4. That's awesome.
Hey everybody, I'm Taylor Green. I'm a partner at Collaborative Fund. Collaborative Fund was started in 2010. We focus on mostly consumer investments. So we'll do anything from consumer marketplaces, consumer software, but we'll also do direct consumer brands. It's a $100 million seed fund, so like Adam, we like to be the first money in, though he tends to go a teeny bit earlier than us. Typically put in $1 million at a time. Typically we take a board seat, that sort of thing. And we like to invest in companies that are at the intersection of better for you and better for everyone. It's another way of kind of talking about network effects, but we're trying to invest in mission-driven entrepreneurs who are pushing the world forward.
Great. I'm Jeremy Levine. I'm with Bessemer Venture Partners. I've been at Bessemer for almost 20 years. Maybe about half my investing has been in consumer internet and related companies, and about half in business software. I'll do as little as $25,000, which I've done in the past handful of years, in an initial investment, and as much as $150 million. I don't really care. Anything between, if you've got a really compelling company that can grow a lot, we'll try to suit the financing to match what you need.
And obviously, exits take a variety of different paths. I thought it'd be good just to start with maybe some of your own experiences of different types of exits you've seen, good and bad, and anything that you can share about it. Obviously, we have to be aware of the fact that a lot of the times when we go through an exit as a VC, we're completely tied up in terms of what we can and cannot say, certainly for a given period. So appreciate anything you guys can tell us about some of the journeys you've been through.
So maybe some of the common tropes which bear to be said at the beginning of the panel, and if they're known and not interesting, we can sort of leave them behind. But most exits happen by numbers at the sub $100 million level. We can definitely go by sector and break that out more. But the vast majority of companies, those acquisitions are happening between $20 and $50 million. It's a mix of money back to the cap table, the preferred investors, and to Common, who are the founders, and a mix of employees. There's a lot of nuance in what percent goes to preferred investors and goes to Common, and it's not always based on ownership. There's retention and how much people think the team and what they're going to do is worth something versus sort of the assets and terminal value of the company that they're buying. And maybe the last truism I'll mention is that companies are bought and not sold, and so typically, if a company's not doing well, things aren't working internally, acquirers often won't see value as well. It's very hard to position yourself for acquisition if people know you yourself are not excited about the prospects. You know, when it rains, it pours. When everyone wants to give you your Series B round and is competing on price, that's when acquirers are probably there as well. So part of this is sort of a power struggle, storytelling exercise of how you position yourself as having a ton of options and a ton of value and why people should be eager to buy you.
So before becoming an investor full-time 5 years ago, I was an entrepreneur, and I've been part of two different companies that exited. To Adam's point about companies being bought, not sold, one of those companies I would say was bought, and the other company I would say was sold. And in the company that was bought, everybody was thrilled, investors were thrilled, founders were thrilled, everything worked out beautifully. The one that was sold, investors were upset. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I would also say that good exits and bad exits are kind of relative. I've been part of a $60-ish million exit as an investor, and we're all, high-fiving, thrilled, closing dinners. It was like the most amazing thing. And I've also been part of one that was around the same size where everybody was sad. So it kind of depends on the situation. So, but I think one thing that I've learned in the limited amount of time I've been doing this is that regardless of companies are bought or sold or whatever the expression is, I think it generally takes about a year for that process to work itself out from start to finish. Obviously, you don't always have that much time if you're trying to get a company acqui-hire, you're trying to have a kick save, so to speak. But generally speaking, like in that first exit I was talking about as an entrepreneur, we first started with a business development partnership with the acquirer, and then a year later they decided to buy us. Similarly with the other company, we'd known the acquirer for quite some time, and they helped us out when the company was kind of running out of cash. So I think giving yourself, to the entrepreneurs out there, giving yourself, trying to see around the next corner, and keeping that door open is a good thing. It often takes a year because you never know what's going to happen.
So I've been part of a whole bunch of M&A events and IPOs. I'll give you 3 pieces of advice. 2 don'ts, 1 do. Number 1, do not trust your advisors. Listen to them, but especially investment bankers, they have their own agenda. You have to understand what it is, and it may or may not align with your interests. And so listen, hear lots of advice, but don't trust anything. Number 2, don't be a hero. And so most entrepreneurs, particularly CEOs, feel like they have to sort of be this sort of tough guy and negotiate the deal with the counterparty. When your company is being acquired, you are being acquired. And in a negotiation, you have to push back a lot on different issues. And if you're pushing back against someone who's trying to buy you, you're making them like you less. And so you need to partner with somebody, ideally one of your investors, but it can be someone else. And they have to deliver all the bad news, and you have to deliver all the good news to make the buyer like you even more. Because you have to be really savvy and not let your ego get in the way where you feel like you have to control everything. You have to think strategically about when you're the hero, when you're not. And then the third thing is get a lawyer. It's almost guaranteed to be a different lawyer than the one you've come from the very beginning with all the way to this point. Because when you're either taking a company public or being acquired, there are very specific expertise that you want from a lawyer. And so you want to make sure your lawyer has done that exact transaction at least 5 times in the last year or 2 years. And a great general corporate lawyer is not necessarily a great M&A lawyer. So if you're looking at an M&A event that's $10 million or $1 billion or $5 billion, find out from your lawyer if they've done a handful of transactions at that same scale recently. If they haven't, go get a new lawyer.
Is anyone here a lawyer?
Should be some, right? Yeah, so I mean, for a VC, an exit can be, I mean, we want to do good things, but obviously sometimes it can be bad things, like you mentioned, bought versus sold. I think some of the most interesting conversational situations I've been in is when a company is being sold or is having an early acquisition event. And those are kind of the times where everything just goes out the window, from my experience, and suddenly the founders are just thrown into this position where they're looking at a life-changing event or potentially their business being completely ruined by going through a long due diligence process and nothing happens at the end. Have you guys had some interesting experiences with this? Like when you see a term sheet come through an M&A, how often would you say that actually ends up being an actual acquisition that gets closed to the deal versus something which gets drawn out and then ends up with nothing?
Term sheet to closing is less than 50%. And that's for a truly detailed term sheet that includes not just sort of price and a few key terms, but like what's the escrow, what's the indemnity, what are the key reps. So a super detailed term sheet that you can actually understand how to translate to definitive documents leads to an actual deal less than half the time. It's usually a waste of time.
Yeah, that would be my experience as well. I've been on it from both sides as a founder, but then also as an investor in companies, and you know, it's something that I always try and encourage founders not to get too excited about, because it just could end up with nothing, and just to keep going with their business plan. There are often other triggers that trigger like an M&A or an exit versus an additional fundraising. What have you guys seen as some of those triggers, and what are some of the advice or the reasons you've given to a founder to go one particular way or the other?
Well, I would say one obvious trigger is when a competitor gets acquired. Oftentimes that might be a good or a bad moment. I think with these types of deals, you're always looking for some sort of catalyst in order to drive it over the 50%. I was going to say 30% of the time. I would say you said less than 50. So I think we're pretty much aligned there. But there are just so many things that can go wrong. You've got two different boards to deal with. Usually, you can have with some of the larger exits that I've been a part of or almost been a part of as an investor. A lot of times it goes sideways after everybody in the corp dev group is on board and there's a champion internally and everything looks great. But then the CEO wakes up one morning and decides not to do it, or the board decides it's not the right thing. So I think the advice that they gave earlier is not to be too excited until the wires hit is good advice. But in terms of the actual question about what to look for, I think you're always kind of looking for a catalyst, a reason, and a window. Because if you don't have a business that has real sustainable competitive advantages, or if there's a lot of competition with deeper pockets, and again you're missing some of these competitive advantages, sometimes it is nice to look for the window and look for the catalyst in the situation so that you can make yourself and your investors some money.
If we're talking about a typical company that is a venture company, typical of the asset class, and by that I mean you are investing heavily into people and technology, and you're thinking about future growth, but are not close to profitability at this moment in time, you're beholden to the capital markets, whether it's raising money or it's some form of acquisition, and so you're in a precarious place because it's not like the headlines that we read for large company M&A where it's a going concern whether they got bought or not. Maybe there's a breakup fee. These are companies that on the venture side need to think about their next sort of drink of the well, and so it's scary. And I think this applies equally to your next round of funding as it does to acquisition, to put all your eggs in one basket. As a responsible founder, you simply can't do that. On the fundraising side, we just had a portfolio company for our Series B where the investor literally the day before closing pulled out and said, "I'm sorry, we've had a strategic change." The company went out of business the next day. There's just nothing else that they can do, and there's no recourse. the investor, and they're sort of going to be fine. The company's not okay, and that's so true for acquisition as well. It could have been an acquirer that pulled out that last minute, and if the founder was getting close to end of runway and didn't have a backup plan, and it's not easy to have a backup plan, then that company's out of business. So it's a scary prospect that you need to navigate in a really smart way.
So, as VCs, how much engagement do you have with potential acquirers prior to making an investment, and to what extent? What does that engagement look like, and to what extent does that inform or persuade some investment decisions you guys make?
We talk to the 10 or 20 largest acquirers of tech startups a lot. We almost never ask them about a particular company we might invest in part because if we think we might want to invest, we often don't want them to know, and then they're just not likely to tell us what they really think anyway. And then even if they do, it changes so significantly. We're trying to figure out what they might be thinking 5 or 7 years down the road. And then similarly, I'll often say to entrepreneurs, you just have to ignore what potential acquirers care about and build your business. And build your business so it's successful and it's self-sustaining and ultimately it's profitable and all those things. And it's probably worth noting, I was thinking while these guys were talking, I had 3 or 4 companies that were acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars, and in every single case but one, there was one buyer, no investment banker. They came to the company and said, "We want to buy you." There's no process. There's no shopping it. It sort of lands in your lap, and you have no idea when it's going to happen. And in the one instance, we had hired a banker and probably talked to 100 potential acquirers, and nothing happened. And then maybe 6 months after that, one of them showed up and said, "Maybe we'll buy it." And so it's very hard to get from potential acquirers what they want because they don't even know.
It reminds me of a story of an entrepreneur friend of mine who sold his company for a few $100 million to Google. And I asked him what it was like, the whole process of the startup. And he said every day I would just get up, I would get dressed, and it was like I would walk down to the bus stop. And I was going to work, but go to the bus stop. It was not a literal bus stop. He said every day I'd get up and go to the bus stop. The bus would never come. But one day I was just hoping the bus would come. The bus was the acquisition. He was like, and so I just kept doing that day after day after day after day. And then one day the bus came. And it was like, he just made it really simple. I think that's right. A lot of companies, you're not really expecting it. You're kind of hoping it happens, but when it does, it's great. You have to leave the bus stop. So, and it was a story that always stuck with me.
This is perhaps a tangent not related to the question, but as you guys were talking, it made me think of the fact that the price discovery piece for acquisitions is really tough, and corp dev are generally pretty good at what they do. By the way, you want them to be good at what they do. It's the worst case if they're bad at what they do, then it's impossible to work with people where they're ungrateful. But they're good at what they do. They do this all the time. They close acquisitions multiple times a year, depending on the companies. It could be many more times. And they're really good at negotiation. They have more of the leverage unless they really, really want you. And by the way, if a company really wants you and it's a really meaningful acquisition, it might actually be the CEO and not corp dev that you're dealing with, especially for some of the bigger pieces. But anyway, you're dealing with corp dev. They're really good at what they do. Price discovery is really hard. How do you get from a number that they throw out to a bigger number? How do you posture as if you don't really need that acquisition and get the number up? What leverage points do you have? So I certainly don't have firm answers. These guys are smarter than me. Perhaps they do. The only answer that I come up with is get a competing term sheet. But I think the price discovery part is just really hard.
But do you spend time with M&A folks hoping that you can tee up your companies to them?
We're going back to the question. No, I don't.
Me neither. So Adam and I are both on the seed side, and the reason I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that, thinking about that, is I view my role in this startup world as one that's all about getting a company off the ground and getting it to the next stage, whatever that is. It's Series A, B, C, to a place where I don't feel super comfortable anymore, which is, I think it's probably around 20 million in ARR, and then I try to pass it off to a great investor like Jeremy, who can take it the rest of the way. And so I don't have to really worry about the M&A stuff. I'd say in two acquisitions as an investor, I did have some role, but it was really just because I went to business school with business school at Columbia, which tends to pump out a lot of investment bankers and M&A folks, and they just happened to be in my class, and they asked me for help during the negotiation when it went sideways. One of those fell apart, and one of those actually happened, but it wasn't because I was trying to get in the mix. It was really just because I happened to know somebody on the inside.
I'll pick up on that point for a second. So one of the reasons why we do try to spend time with acquirers, and why I would encourage you as entrepreneurs to spend time with acquirers, is not to try to figure out whether they might want to buy you or what they're looking for or how to build your business, but just to build trust. And so an actual M&A event, it lasts some number of weeks, sometimes months, and there's lots of stress and tension, and having a trust relationship with somebody to sort of cut through the crap and to say, no, this is what's really going on to the other side of the transaction can be incredibly valuable. It sounds like that was exactly what Taylor was alluding to. And so having some relationship on the other side is super useful. Again, not to try to figure out what they're going to do or second guess their strategy, but to sort of have an honest discussion when stress is high.
And as an investor, to what extent do you guys have people in your team that manage those relationships, or is it you doing that?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay. I think that's understandable. My bankers have been mentioned a number of times. There's sometimes a conflict there, and normally a good relationship. You guys just kind of just talk a little bit about how you work with investment bankers for some of the exits of your companies. What's the value they bring, and because they're taking a lot of the final amount of money from the company's costs and the value they bring typically.
I have a point of view on that. So I've tried it kind of all ways. Running the process, the banker really involved, really trusting them. I think Jeremy's advice at the beginning was really good. But the best way I think to leverage an investment banker is to do the following. Call them up and say, it's somebody you really trust. And you say, hey, I think we need to sell XYZ company. Will you call the following 4 companies and 4 others that you think would be good acquirers, and tell them that XYZ company is not for sale, but you think it would be a good. You think it might be for sale in the future, or it's not for sale, right? But there's something you just want to basically put it on the list, and that is a very low probability of happening, but it doesn't. I haven't had much success with the quote unquote process. It just ends up being a little bit of a lowest common denominator, lowest bidder type of thing. And a lot of times there's only one person that comes to the table, or not at all.
The best experiences that we've had are when companies get an initial offer, they have an acquirer that is interested, potentially it's at a term sheet, it might not even be quite that firm, probably at a term sheet, and then that's when we think it makes sense to bring in a banker to open up options and create a little bit more of a process. And typically, I found that a good banker has the best relationships and sort of the best positioning within the different stakeholders to really create some more options.
I think the same for us. We have different, because we invest in such broad categories, we have different investment bankers that we know are really good for all the different areas, and then just kind of try and make sure our company's on their radar. And then critically for us, I think it's kind of like a hotline. If something starts to happen suddenly, like you get a term sheet where you get suddenly a huge amount of interest, landscape changes, whatever, you can then call a trusted professional who really can help leverage that.
We're talking a lot about the core data function in acquirers, and I think it makes sense to also talk about product teams, and so that could be the source of acquisition interest as well. And so the product teams, especially as I think about those sort of 20 large tech companies, those are the ones that have the best sense of their individual roadmaps, the competitive set of startups, and they're the ones that probably have the best sense of exactly who fills a very certain need or who would be most valuable. And so we've seen a lot of examples of product teams being the initial source of interest.
All right, I want to open up for questions. So I think we've got some microphones around.
Thank you guys for your perspective. I appreciate it. Maybe Adam and Taylor, this is more to you, but I'd love to hear, Jeremy, your perspective as well. As early stage investors, what can you do, or what do you do to protect yourself against later round dilution, more aggressive terms that might not have your best interest in mind?
It's a really good question. So there's sometimes
I'll answer it for you. So just don't push for a stupid price. If you let the later investor invest at a reasonable price, you get clean terms. When you push for really, really aggressive prices, and they try to protect themselves with all sorts of juicy terms. And so keep alignment by keeping it simple.
And on investing as well. Continuing to invest in companies.
Ironically, if you like the next price, then you want to put more money in. And when you don't want to put any money in, that's when there's the most tension between you and another investor.
I would say where we get into trouble is, so our earlier funds were much smaller, and so they didn't have as much reserve capital. And when you don't have reserve capital to protect yourself in a down round or something, a situation that has a lot of, high lift prep, something like that, that might affect you later on. If it's a pay-to-play type of situation, you're kind of in a very tough spot, and there's not a lot you can do. So now we try to reserve a little bit of capital to protect ourselves. But I don't know what the outcome is yet, and whether that was a good idea, because so far the data shows, or my data shows, that when there's a down round, something's falling apart, the company goes to zero anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I do think a lot about it when you see these terms and you're getting diluted like crazy. And sometimes I pick up the phone and call the investor, but usually the investors who are doing that type of stuff aren't I don't really have a relationship with them anyway, and then it's not somebody who I'm trying to work with a lot. So it's a tough situation for the early stage folks.
These are 10-year journeys, and so as early stage investors, if we invested in year 1, you're talking about a situation that's in year 8. I would say I have zero control over that, but for backing fantastic people who hopefully make good decisions in year 2 through 10.
I think the way that we deal with this is we save more than half our fund for onward investment. So we're coming into the round and probably up to 20% of the round to give the onward investment confidence that they continue to make value. The other thing is we provide value through our program. So we continue to have founders coming out to Shenzhen and supporting them through their hardware journey of product 3, 4, and 5, which again is just adding value to them.
Another point is that at some point there's a tension between what's legal and what's ethical. It's kind of up to the individual, very nice.
How you guys doing? Thank you. Question about value of a company at either an investment or an exit stage between the team, the business, and the intellectual property. And how do you guys value that? Obviously, it's on a company by company basis. But is there certain things that you look for in any given company that would weight one towards any of those 3 sectors or another?
You mean when the company's sold, or when we're
Yeah, when the company's sold.
Well, I would say that the companies that achieve the highest price are generally the best businesses. The ones that get acquired tend to have a good team and not a great business, not a great IP. But I haven't been a part of a lot of situations where the company was acquired for the IP, meaning actual patents. Those are helpful. I view those as there's a kind of defend the business, but it's not the core asset. I think the business is what we're focused on building. Building a great business that's defensible over time. And if you have that, somebody will acquire it for a lot of money. But when we're investing, we're looking at the team first and foremost. We're looking at the market, but the team is going to be able to build that big business. We're not looking to invest in the team because there's a great team because there's downside protection in the acquire. The way the VC model tends to work is your top 1, 2, 3 companies drive the lion's share of the returns, and then you have another tier that's maybe returning a little bit of capital, maybe 1 to 2, 3x, and then a lot of them go to 0.
My thanks to everyone on the panel once again. Val Sellian here, founder at Funeral, the official funeral app. This question is for Mr. Levine. When you're trying to do a deal per se, do you look for innovation, or are you looking for metrics, specific sets of data? What is your process like? If you can speak on that, what is it exactly you're looking for? Thanks.
So if you don't mind, actually, this is not exactly the topic because we're talking about exits. So brief answer is okay, but let's get back on topic.
Very briefly, it depends. I mean, if it's a super early stage company with nothing, then I'm looking for the team and the idea. If it's much later stage business, then I'm looking at metrics and detailed operations and so forth. So it really depends on the situation.
So one thing that I've had discussions with when people talk negatively about VCs, it's on the liquidation preference and participation in preferred shares, and like really they'll say like, you get squeezed by VCs, so in an exit basically all the money goes to the VCs and very little goes back to the founders. And I was curious, like, is that actually a common phenomenon that takes place? What's the market today, and like what's the reasoning behind having higher liquidation preference as opposed to having more like a simpler deal with just like a valuation that everyone's comfortable with?
I'll take it. I mean, the short answer is when things go badly, everybody points their finger at everybody else, unfortunately. And generally speaking, people are unhappy with the way proceeds are allocated when things go badly, because the VC effectively didn't buy a percentage of the company, they bought a preferred security. When things go really well, no one looks at the securities because it all converts to a common equivalent and you're getting your percentage. And so, another way to think about it is if you raise money for a startup at a $5 million valuation, which in this day and age isn't even a particularly high value for a very early stage company to raise money at, there's no way you could sell that company for $5 million that day. So why is someone valuing it at $5 million? Well, it's not